Have you ever wondered what you would do if you discovered your entire life was built on a lie? Let me tell you the most incredible story I've heard in years. A Chinese boy was sold for just $300 and now lives like a king in America. But wait, what happened in between will break your heart and then fill it with hope. Tell me in the comments. Do you believe in destiny, or do we create our own path? Li Wei was only 8 years old when his world collapsed like a house of cards. It was 1998, in a rural village in China's Hunan province, where the mountains stood like silent giants and poverty bit harder than the winter wind. His father, a rough-handed farmer with empty eyes, had just lost the last harvest to a devastating drought. His mother had died 2 years earlier from an illness they could never afford to treat. That night, as Li Wei slept on his worn-out wooden bed, he didn't know it would be the last time he'd see those cracked adobe walls he called home. His father, desperate and broken, had made the most heartbreaking decision a parent can make. At dawn, a man in a dirty suit with a fake smile arrived in a rusty van. The exchange was quick and silent. $300 for a child. Can you imagine waking up and hearing your dad say you're no longer his son? Li Wei still remembers the salty taste of his tears mixing with the dust on the road as the van drove away. His father didn't even look back. The man who bought him was named Chen, a child trafficker operating between the poorest provinces of China. Li Wei was taken to a hidden orphanage in Beijing, a place straight out of a nightmare. Alongside 50 other children, he lived crammed into windowless rooms, eating once a day, a thin soup with rotting vegetables. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Li Wei became a ghost of himself, a boy who had learned not to cry because tears changed nothing. But something extraordinary was about to happen, something he couldn't have imagined even in his wildest dreams. One spring morning in 1999, 2 people arrived at the orphanage who seemed to shine differently from anyone Li Wei had ever met. Sarah and Michael Thompson, an American couple from California, had spent years trying to have children. Sarah was a primary school teacher with warm blue eyes, and Michael was an engineer, a tall, gentle man with an always honest smile. They had come to China through an adoption agency, but something had gone wrong with the paperwork for the child they planned to adopt. That's when fate played its most mysterious card. Sarah saw Li Wei sitting alone in a corner, drawing in the dirt with a stick. The boy had created a detailed map of his home village. Every house, every tree, every path, marked with breathtaking precision. How can you remember all that in such detail? Sarah asked in basic Mandarin she had learned. Li Wei looked at her with deep, ancient eyes and said, "Because one day I'm going back and I'll find my dad. And I'll show him I'm worth more than $300. Those words pierced Sarah's heart like an arrow. That very night, she and Michael made a decision that would change 3 lives forever. But here comes the part that will give you chills. Technically, Li Wei's adoption was illegal. The boy had been sold, not abandoned. The Thompsons faced an impossible choice: return to the US without him or risk everything to save a child they barely knew. Michael remembers that night in the hotel as the longest of his life. Sarah was crying and I was pacing the room like a caged lion. We knew that if we took him we could face criminal charges. But we also knew that if we left him there, that child would die slowly inside. The decision they made broke every rule, every protocol, every law. But sometimes love is bigger than the law. With the help of a local lawyer who risked his career, the Thompsons managed to get Li Wei out of China using documents that technically listed him as a medical orphan, a child in urgent need of treatment abroad. It was a noble lie that cost them another $15,000 in bribes and legal fees. On August 15, 1999, Li Wei stepped onto American soil for the first time. He was 9 years old, weighed nearly 45 pounds less than average, and wore the same filthy clothes he'd had on for months. But he had something no one could take from him: a will of iron forged in the fire of suffering. The first years in California felt like learning to live on another planet. Li Wei, now named David Thompson, had to learn English, adapt to a completely different culture, and most importantly learn to trust again. Nightmares haunted him every night. He dreamed that his adoptive father would sell him too. Sarah remembers how David would hide food under his bed during the first few months. He didn't understand that there would always be food tomorrow. For him, every day was a fight for survival. But something magical started to happen. David showed extraordinary intelligence, especially in math and science. It was as if his brain, once forced to memorize every detail of his lost world, had now become a giant sponge soaking up knowledge. By age 12, David was already taking high school level classes. At 15, he earned a full scholarship to study at MIT. His adoptive parents cried with pride the day he received his acceptance letter. But the story doesn't end there. During his college years, David never forgot his promise. Every summer he returned to China, not as a tourist but as a researcher. Using his new skills and resources, he began to trace his story, village by village, record by record. In 2010, at 21 years old, David finally found his biological father. The man who had sold him for $300 was now a broken old man, living alone in the same adobe hut where David had been born. When they came face to face after 12 years, neither could speak for several minutes. What happened next surprised everyone, even David. Instead of confronting his father with anger and resentment, David did something that revealed the greatness of his soul. He knelt before the old man and said, "Dad, I came to take you with me. You'll never go hungry again. You'll never be alone again." His biological father cried for the first time in decades. "Son, I don't deserve your forgiveness. I sold you like an animal." David hugged him and whispered, "Dad, because of what you did, I found a family that loved me. Because of that, now I can take care of you." Today, in 2025, David Thompson is a billionaire. His medical tech company has revolutionized the treatment of rare diseases in children. He lives in a mansion in Silicon Valley with his American wife and their 2 kids. But the most incredible part: his biological father lives with them, in a special suite built in traditional Chinese style. Every morning, David has breakfast with both of his fathers, the one who sold him and the one who bought him with love. He's also created a foundation that has rescued over 3,000 children from human trafficking in Asia. His story has become legend in China, where he's known as the $300 boy who conquered America. You know what's the most beautiful part of all this? David never changed his legal name. Officially, he's still Li Wei Thompson. Because, he says, you can't get to where you're going if you forget where you came from. The last time I interviewed him, I asked if he regretted anything. He looked at me with those same deep eyes and said, "Regret? If I hadn't been sold, I would never have known unconditional love. If I hadn't suffered, I would never have valued happiness. If I hadn't lost everything, I never would have gained so much." His story teaches us that sometimes the darkest moments in life are actually the beginning of something extraordinary. That pain can turn into purpose. And that true love can grow in the most unexpected places. Now tell me, what do you think? Do you believe David forgave his biological father too easily? Or do you think his decision shows the true greatness of the human spirit? Share your thoughts in the comments. I love reading what you think about these stories that remind us that miracles do exist.